and welcome to Feelings Matter, brought to you by Mindful Appy. I'm Michelle Stinson Ross, and I am joined by my co host Tina Schweiger and our special guest from NAMI Central Texas, Karen Reynes. Hello, ladies. How are you today?
Hi,
Hello.
good. Thank you.
Doing good.
So,
Doing good.
hey, we're to the end of November and working our way into December of 2021. I know a lot of businesses have already been through a lot of 2022 planning, but I want to kind of inject a little bit of mindfulness into that
Mhm.
planning, if that's all right with you guys, and
I think it's a
hopefully all
great
right with
idea.
our audience.
Yeah.
Um, Karen, we have been talking quite a bit through this season of the podcast
Hmm.
about different um, communication skills, different aspects of mental health and wellness that we can do workshops and small trainings on. And I know that you work a lot with businesses in teaching them about empathy within the workplace or stress management or how to
Hmm.
talk about mental health and wellness. Um, what's one of the common questions you get post training about how do I implement this? What does this actually look like on the daily in my company?
Yeah. And I love it ask that because it means to me that they really get it in the sense that really it's not just about checking a box and say, hey, we did a training on stress management or we talked about empathy and so we have a few tools. The reality is this is really rooted in change. Like how do you change the cultures to create a more mentally healthy, friendly, psychically safe, empathetic, compassionate work environment where people will live. And that doesn't come from just having me do one training, right? That's transformational change. Folks ask me that, that's indicating that hey, they recognize that and they're asking for how do we really create that change? And I think it's important to recognize that transformational change doesn't happen overnight. It's a long process. It takes a very intentional commitment to it. And I think it's really important to recognize when we think transformational change, that sounds like something big. When the reality is, when companies that are really invested in this, they're making small change that are sort of can have this long term sort of avalanche of, and the things that can happen are things like often will encourage folks to I can provide them with things like that they can use during their meeting times. So what does it look like if you start a meeting with some prompt which really engaging about gratitude, or where you start a meeting with a 1 minute breathing exercise? Because most of the training I do, we start with that. Like, how are we modeling that? And then I think it's also things like looking at your policies and do your policies and your match up. So for instance, we were talking a little bit about PTO, and that's been a where you've seen a lot of companies move toward things like unlimited PTO. And one of the things that we're seeing with some companies is that while there may have been good intentions in that, the reality is oftentimes what happens is when people have unlimited PTO, they don't take it at all because the culture is built into work, 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 work. And the companies where I've really seen that be effective is companies where they say you have unlimited PTO, but just know, hey, we're watching you. Like our expectation is that you're going to
Mhm.
take time off and really monitor and saying, hey, 3 months ago, taken one day off. What are you going to be doing? What are your plans for that self care? So I think making changes like that. And then we about changes where we again build cultures in which the expectation is that you're always on. So are you always on? It's the expectation that people are answering emails at 9 o'clock at night. I've told you about companies that I've seen that like their outgoing message in email says, hey, we believe in work-life balance for our employees. So we encourage our employees not to answer messages after 5 o'clock in the evening. If you have something urgent, blah, 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 here's what you can do. This was from a law firm. And man, folks, they're the worst. Yeah. They're
Mhm.
70, 80 hour week folks. So to have a law firm say like, no, we've got to have good boundaries. I think those little things are really powerful. I love what I was sharing with you guys that Thrive, the book by Ariana Huffington, she talks about an app that they developed that any of us have access to called Way. in which basically you set that up with your email. And what it does is it sends an outgoing message to anybody that emailed you while you're on vacation. And the message says, hey, I'm on vacation. And just so you know, I'm not responding to any emails. And all emails that I have vacation time will be automatically deleted. So please reach back out to me on this date when I'm back in the office. And I just thought, wow, such a small thing. I can't tell you how many times I hear people say, oh man, one of the things I hate about going on vacation is then you come back and you're just overwhelmed. Like, I almost don't want to take time off because I don't want to have to deal with the hassle of coming back and being overwhelmed. You see how those things, just making changes, because we want to encourage people to take time off, but many times we don't create boundaries for our teams so that they feel confident and that it's safe for them to take off and not feel like they're punished when they've come back. And I've heard people use that language. I just feel like I pay the price, like I'm punished when I get back because I'm so overwhelmed and people's expectations for me. Or sometimes when I get back, my boss will say little things like, glad you're finally back because that project didn't get done while you were gone. So how does that make me feel about the next time when I want to take time off? So changing culture takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of really being rooted in empathy, so in the understanding that mental health is health and that chronic stress leads to mental health outcomes that aren't good. Understanding that we live in a culture in which exhaustion is a status. So I think it's just asking ourselves those kinds of questions like, is that a status symbol in our work? I work in social services, right? I work for a nonprofit. You think they would be a whole lot better. I think some of us that work in social services or healthcare, like worst, because we show so much empathy and caring for others that we do a lousy job of self-care. And I've been telling folks in many of the workshops I've been doing lately is that I firmly believe that our success has firmly and fiercely rooted in a commitment to our own self-care. Like, we have to be fierce about our commitment to our own self-care because we are only human and we all need time to rest, to play, to recharge ourselves and the people that we love and care about. And that takes time to change that culture. And it takes time that when we give our teams and our employees time for rest and self-care and play, that they will back with batteries recharged and ready to go. I think it's really interesting. Was it Japan that recently went through this? Like, there's a company there that has tried moving towards this day work week, and they have actually seen folks like just, and it's not that people are working 12-hour days. Like, they are just so excited about, like, let's get this done because I get these 3 days off. Like, it's been really positive. And so I think that there's some good air that when we have time for rest and play, we actually come back and we're more creative, more collaborative, less, I don't know about you, like, I can tell when I'm overworked and overwhelmed because I don't have any patience for people. I'm less creative because it's like, I just got to, so I'm not open to new ideas. And so the week off for Thanksgiving, which is not easy for me but I knew that I needed it. I needed time to just rest and play. I slept in, I went on a bunch of walks, and I came back, yes, a little Monday morning about what my email inbox was going to look like, but I also came back excited to get back to the work. So we just have to trust those kinds of things. And I think there's little things that companies can do to address those changes, but there's got to be a long-term commitment to it because we're talking about culture change.
So it starts from the leadership, and I mean, the leaders really have to start by setting that example, right? Wouldn't you think?
Oh,
How
yes.
hard is that for a leader? And like, talk about like how radical that might be for them to, what does that look like in a day in the life? Basically, you work with a lot of business leaders who are these overworkers, who are on their email at 8 o'clock at night and on the weekends. What does that actually do? What kind of signals does that send? And what kind of changes do they need to make?
I think you named something really important, Tina. And I often say this to leaders, like, you can say all kinds of things, but it's really in practice, what are you modeling? So I know for myself with my own team, like when I got to that place where I would say, like, hey, I'm taking 2 weeks off. And one, I want to thank you for being such a great team because I know that everything's going to get taken care of while I'm gone. But likewise, what I want you to know is you can also do the same. Like we got it covered while you're gone. Everyone should be able to do that. But yes, I definitely had to model that, right? I had to model that I was confident in my team, that they could handle it, right? And I did. I mean, the reality, it wasn't just me, pretending. Like I really did have a strong team who was really capable, and I knew that I could. Everything was going to get taken care of. Like no one of us should feel like if I'm gone, everything is going to fall apart. If you are in that situation where everything is on you, that is not good. It's not good for you, but it is not good for the organization and for the team. Everyone should be able to, we should have cross pollination in our teams. I know that's one of the things that actually the pandemic really helped us with, was doing more of that cross pollination of understanding what was everybody's roles, so that people did have that sort of flexibility to trust that, hey, if I need to be gone, somebody else knows how to get this done. Because like I said, it's not good for the organization, but it's really not good for you as an individual if you feel like I can't take off any time because my stuff won't get done. And we see that all the time. I mean, my husband talks about that all the time. Like I have to, like I've got to be there. It's just, but we've created cultures in that, and I think bring people out, and that is really showing itself in the midst of the pandemic. That whole resignation thing that we're seeing, what was it? I haven't seen the latest numbers, but I know in August, like 4 million people left their jobs. I've been watching in LinkedIn how many people are moving. Like it's astounding to me how many people are moving into new roles. And I think that's reflective of during the midst of this pandemic, people said, I just can't do this anymore. And I think had we in many situations been taking better care of our many folks might not into that place of feeling that. And I also think people are going to be surprised, because I think the grass always looks greener. I mean, I think the reality talking about culture, and I think it's interesting to see folks asking about that more. And I think our millennials and our Gen Z folks are much better about ask questions when they're looking at jobs. What's the culture here? And I think that that's really important to be asking those kinds of questions. How do you take care of the mental health of your teams? How do you encourage people to take good care of themselves time off? We should all be asking those kinds of questions.
Tina, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I've heard of a trend recently, and I wanted to make note of this because I think it's an excellent one. A couple companies that I know of are enforcing a mandatory mental health day, like one Friday a quarter. So I think those companies that do offer unlimited PTO, and they notice that people are just not taking it and they're working too hard, what they're doing is saying, you know what, everyone is off this Friday.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Like if Nike everything down for a week, we should all be able to do that. And I really do love that approach. I don't really like this notion of having allotted mental health days, because I think that's counterproductive. We have to think about mental health as health. So from my perspective, if you have PTO or whatever it is, then having a day where you need to take care of your mental health, and you should just take that time off, and it should not be it as a separate thing. But then that as a company or as a team, you're taking one Friday off a month, or you're taking, like I know our team, we took off in October, which was Mental Health Awareness Week in October. Like we just shut down the office and everybody. And I have to tell you, like if you've not had that experience where everybody's gone on that day and we say no emails, no work, like everybody off, it's really kind of cool, because part of what we talked about was the feeling everybody else is working, and then you get back and half of the emails that you're getting that are in your inbox is from your team. How wonderful that week off, and then it's like everybody was off and hear what everybody had planned. And so I love that idea of teams as a whole saying, here's what we're going to really taking that time off, because it sends a clearer message than that from the very top, right? We're saying this is so important. We're setting aside a day where we want you to be outside, do some fun things, take care of yourself, sleep in, whatever that is.
Well, one of the things that kind of jumped to my mind is again, that communication aspect. You had given the example, Karen, of the manager that goes, well, I hope you had a good vacation because nothing was getting done. Well, I think some of it is we need to go down so granular that, okay, instead of saying that, what we need for you to say to your teammate or your report or whoever, hey, how can I support you? What can we do to make this easy on you so that when you come back, you don't feel stressed out about things that were left undone while you were gone? Who do we need to assign to cover your stuff?
Yep.
Really be proactive about that communication ahead of time so that we don't get this like dig in the ribs for taking time off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this goes back. One of the things I've also been saying to business leaders is you can bring me in to do some work with your team around empathy, for instance, and that's great and important work. But you also need to bring me in to do some work specifically with supervisors because they need some in navigating that and knowing how to communicate and knowing how to communicate from a place of empathy and also trusting. I think sometimes managers do that out of their own sense of fear, anxiety, and concern. Like going back to this cultural change, like we have to change that culture at all the different levels so that supervisors and managers know how to respond to that and know that you can create space for empathy and still hold people accountable. I think people
Right.
are afraid of empathy because it sounds to them like, oh, I'm people, or the expectations are lowered. And it's like, no, what that means. Like the two of those things can reside together. You can have empathy and understanding and compassion for people and understand that they need time off to take care of someone in their family that's sick, to take care of themselves, to take a vacation, and still hold them accountable. And that's that piece of, hey, I know you're working on project A. So how do we ensure that while you're gone, really supported so you can relax? What does that look like? We're going through that. That's where we've got someone who's about to go on maternity leave. Like we know is coming in January. How do we person so that this person who's going to take a wonderful 3 months off to be with their baby, that they don't feel like, oh, I'm laying down the team. I'm not providing them with what they need, and instead say to her, what can we do? How do we support you? How do we plan for this? And actively engage her planning so that she still has ownership and feels like things are going to get done. So she can just focus on that. Because this is what I'm going to tell you. When she comes back then after that leave, and also giving her the flexibility to say, hey, and come back half days initially. So she eases into it, right? We were talking about earlier about vacation time. Like, wouldn't it be nice if after vacation, like you had 2 days where you had meetings or anything where you're just like, you're just kind of acclimating to being back in the office? That's what we're doing for her in terms of her maternity leave, like flexibility. So she's going to come back, but she's initially going to come back half days. So she's easing into it. But that she comes back with a sense of, okay, I'm ready for this. And I know that things have gotten done. I'm going to feel overwhelmed. And that she feels absolutely no guilt about the fact that she's taking this time off. That in fact, we're supporting her and we're celebrating during this time of exciting, but daunting change, right? Even good change is hard. Like a new family member, a new house, anything that in your life still creates a certain level of stress, and really recognizing that and supporting that. And that's what empathy looks like. Empathy doesn't look like, okay, well, just leave it all there and we'll take care of it while you're gone and we'll be okay. It's a very proactive approach to making sure that people feel supported and feel confident that when they come back, everything's going to be fine. They're not going to come back to a mess, right? Because that's what keeps people from being really relaxed when they're taking time off as well. That it's like, oh man, it's just going to be a mess when I get back. So the time off, but it's got to be really intentional.
It's I don't even think that it's worth understating how much of a mind shift that is for many leaders. Many leaders are coming from a background of looking at humans as resources, if you will, as numbers on a spreadsheet, as things that produce revenue or don't. Very robot-like, and that's our 20th century industrialism sort of bleeding over. Whereas what you're describing is really flipping that on its head, and it's more of a human-centered management where I'm really reading right now, Leaders Eat Last. I don't know if you've read that, but it's excellent. And it really talks about that our companies now are our modern day tribes. These are our tribes, our groups of people that are our de facto family, if you will. And if we treat our family members and we look out for them and they're confident that we've got their back, that we're proactively supporting them, they'll go to the ends of the earth for you because they know that they're supported and safely within that tribe. So
Yep.
really flipping the thinking about humans in your company completely upside down as more important even than your customers. Because it's almost like your own personal health. If you don't take care of your own personal health, you can't take care of anyone else. If you don't take care of the health of your employees can't take care of the customers. So that comes first. So what you're modeling with your employee who's going on maternity leave is so healthy, and it is human-centered. It's centered around her, the support that she needs, and even thinking about what it will be like for her when she reenters the workplace and she needs a little bit of time to transition back after such a tremendous life-changing break.
Right. And it seems common sense, but it is countercultural for us. It's a little radical, as you mentioned. And I do think that, again, we're at a place, I think, and we're at a moment in history, honestly. I think that one of the pandemic has done is to make people realize more than ever what really matters. So I'm hearing a lot of these kind of conversations. And I tell you what, leaders to ignore that are going to pay the price, because when you've got good employees, good team members who you really value what they bring to your organization, if you want to ensure that they stay there and they stay connected and they continue to be a part of your team through life challenges, you have to see them as humans, as the human beings that they are, and recognize what their human needs are. Because that's the thing that I know about, when I think about this particular story that I've just told you, this is baby number 2 for this employee. And so we've already this once before. And I think, she felt confident in saying, I want to grow my family, knowing that she could do it with our organization because she'd been through it once. And that was the exact approach that we took. And I have to tell you, as a woman, I think for many, many women, and I should say men as well, because on the same point, I think many times men feel like they're not supported either, right? It's like, you're not supposed to take, like, okay, you can take a few days off, but that's right, takes the time off. And so I think we're really shifting and understanding the importance of supporting people, women and men, through these very important life changes that people have. But I think for women, that has been a challenge in the past. I certainly felt it. My oldest daughter is almost 30. So 30 years ago, I mean, I certainly, felt sometimes that I wasn't that I was making these decisions. And
Honestly, you're lucky to keep your job 30 years ago when you leave to have a baby,
And that's what I felt when I first got married and started having my kids over 24 years ago now. That it was an either or choice. Either I stayed home and did the best mom job I could, or I left their care to somebody else. And pursued a career. It was like, it's a choice. You can either do this or you can do that, and they are mutually exclusive. There is no Venn diagram. And I think we're beginning to see that the Venn diagram exists, whether we practically implement it or not.
Yeah.
A lot more options.
I think already we're going through transformational changes, whether you like it or not, kind of thing. Right. Like, it's just happened. I do think that leaders that are more progressive and more thoughtful and strategic will understand the power of really slowing down a bit and changing some, like I said, a law firm that sends out that's the outgoing message goes out with someone's email. Like, I just thought that
Awesome.
was just amazing that you would see something like that. And I think it's really important work. And I think going back to where we started, recognizing, I think a lot of times companies focus on policies and procedures. And I think right now, as we talk about really taking care of health and really creating space for that, companies are out in things like EAPs and apps and gym memberships and all that. And that's great. Like, the value of those things, but we've got to create a culture in which people feel like they can actually utilize those things. I remember working with the daughter of one of my friends, and she'd started this new startup company doing really well. Like, they had access to all kinds of stuff. Gym member, every day they brought in meals for them so that they never had to.
Uh-oh.
But the reality, she said to me, she's like, okay, so I'm working 12 hours a day. I've gained all this weight because like food gets brought in all the time. I never that's available to me. And when I speak at all of like feeling like I need rest, like I needed some time off, like it's kind of frowned upon. And so it's been really interesting to watch this young woman who I'm talking about, like, shift in, she's seen the culture shift where she's still at the same place, but she's seen the culture shift. Like, that company has now been to do some work with them, and they've really shifted in terms of how they are taking care of their teams and recognizing the power of encouraging people to take good care of themselves. So it's been fun to see that, especially knowing where she started when that company, this was probably, she's been there for about 12 years or so. So in the last 12 years, how much it's shifted. So there's great potential for us to change and shift and approach things in new ways. But I think it takes a lot of intent. And I think sometimes it takes employees and team members willing to step up and voice and say, something's got to change. And I think that some has happened as well, is employees who are stepping up and saying, this has to change. Like, I do this anymore.
I think we have so many Gen Zs entering the workforce, and they've had such a different experience in even their K through 12 with 504 and accommodations and just expecting their health to be a priority. And I'm not surprised, and I'm glad. I'm rooting for this Gen Z to make a real positive impact for all of us.
Okay. So
man, they tend to be, they are definitely you see all the studies coming out, like things like taking jobs that are less pay but allows more ability for schedules. I mean, just like, we got a lot, so more power to them, because I think they really are helping transform the culture around, how we work. Like,
well, speaking of what does that look like, right? I tend to be the pragmatist in the room.
Right.
So what are some things that, I can make a list and we can do this one little thing in a very practical way and I can check off the box, those very, very pragmatic things. So we were talking about empathy, and I know that you do a workshop on empathy in the workplace. Following that training, what are some really, really like granularly specific, how do the way we conduct meetings change? How does the way we email one another change? What very specifically granular things that I can say, okay, we're going to do this with our team in order to implement a bit more empathy in the way that we do things?
The first thing that comes to mind is this. I think in that I do around empathy, one of the things that I really talk a lot about is listening and the power of active listening. Most of us are actually, even those of us who think we're good listeners, many times aren't. And isn't for that, right? We actually, our brains process information faster than we speak. So when we're in meetings and in conversations, many times people are speaking and our brains are already working. So one encourage people to do is to recognize their ability to be active listeners. And I talk about a few key things that people can, focus that you can do differently. I find myself I own this, right? In the past, and it's still something I have to work on, that I interrupt people. And sometimes this is excited, I'm like, and so my brain is going, but interrupting is one of those things that often shuts down then the other person. And so I have found that sometimes having a pad of paper where if something comes to my mind, I'll just jot it down so that I don't forget it. Be assured that I'm not going to forget to mention that after this person has finished talking. That ability to repeat, like listening, so to repeat what the person just said, allows you to be mindful about the fact that you're actively listening, because otherwise that's what our brain does. It just starts thinking about other stuff, or it starts already coming up with the solution or answer to whatever it is. So that ability to just repeat. So I share some different skills around that, and that can be really helpful. Recognizing where is that area of listening that maybe is a challenge. Really surprised. I actually worked with a group that are a group of communicators. I was struck by across all of them said, "Oh man, I have some of this." And so a little exercise together where they had to tell each other a story, any kind of story about like a movie that or something that happened with one of their kids, took turns and had to really listen to the person in a way where they were able to repeat the story and to ask questions. And it was fascinating to hear them all come back to the group and talk about the fact that oh my gosh, like that was definitely an area that was a struggle for them. So I think listening is a key to all of that. And then I pointed to it earlier that leaders modeling what that looks like and diminishing the fear around empathy means people get to do whatever they want, and really understand what empathy really is, and how it can manifest itself in the workplace. And just creating, I think we've given a lot of great ideas of just simply do in the office, giving people permission to send out an email when they're going to be gone on vacation to say, I'm going to be gone for a few days. Here's the folks you can reach out to if you have questions. Otherwise, make sure you email me when I'm back, because I won't be able to go through all of the emails. Just that, right? Giving permission to do things like that, and then really modeling what it means to do the self-care piece, I think is critically important. Never underestimate the power. People are watching you as a leader. And so if you are taking good and saying, I need to emails after hours, and if you are making sure not to email did you see that Portugal made it a law that bosses can't text their teams, their employees after hours? Did you see that? Like, I don't think we need laws. Like, we don't need laws around that. We just need common sense. Like, unless it's something super urgent, you should not be emailing your employees and your teams after hours. But Portugal actually passed a law. So having some common sense around giving people opportunities to have their quiet time in the evening and on weekends, and just developing some of those practices because we have to practice them. So we're going to fail sometimes, but the more we practice, get at them. So know that at the beginning, when you're trying to create change, you're going to stumble about. Extend a lot of empathy and grace that you're trying.
So I want to make sure that I have dropped the link in the discussion for this video, and I also have it here on the screen. There is a place you can go on the NAMI Central Texas website to look at all of the various trainings and things. And okay, now that I have the education, how do I implement this? Karen's really great at helping make that transition into what's the next step. And I want to make sure that you actually have access to that. But part of implementing change is also being sure that we're implementing effective change, that just because I encourage everybody to update their email signature to include this line doesn't necessarily mean that the culture, that the meaning around why that line in our email signatures exists has actually caught up, right? we need some way to track and get feedback. Hey, did this change actually accomplish what we were after? Right. And that's part of what I want to bring kind of Tina into the discussion a bit more is how do we do that? How do we actually measure that? How do we keep track of that change? And is there a way to track, hey, which skills are more effective? Is it, how do we track this implementation versus that implementation? Tina, I want to kind of open up the floor to you to talk about how we keep track of that. And are we actually doing a good job with what we say we want to accomplish?
It comes back to what Karen said about it's a practice, right? This is something we practice on a daily basis. And so we need to measure it on a daily basis so that we can follow the trends and see if in general, when we make a change, maybe we choose one change at a time. Maybe we say, you know what, we're gonna implement a no texting after hours policy, and we mark the date when that policy was implemented, and we track our emotional states prior to, and then we look at how it changes in the weeks following, to expect that there may be, an incredibly happy period where people are, or there may be an incredibly low period where people are frustrated because they can't text after hours, or they're having trouble complying, or one of the things that we found with working with some of the workplace clients of NAMI was after the empathy training, some of the moods went down. And sometimes it's because it can be hard, and even good change is hard to get your head around. So we may not always feel really great about it right after the fact. But when our mental health and our overall health starts trending upward over time, then we can see the impact of it. Yeah, marking that date and looking in to see, and then maybe we implement another change 2 or 3 weeks later, and it's we're going to delete emails when people are on vacation. We're going to get that app and we're going to just have them all deleted. Now how has that impacted our emotional well-being and our culture? And then looking at it from what it is. It's a practice. It's things that are micro nudges and micro changes that have to be made over time, because you cannot simply make a decision to become Zappos and then flip a switch and you're that. It just doesn't work that way. People don't change that quickly. They're not open to changing that quickly. And many people are quite rooted in their patterns and their habits, and it's very difficult to change one tiny little thing. I mean, go to the accounting department of any company. You'll probably find a lot of people that never want anything to change. So acknowledge that change is hard, even good change, that it is a practice. And that is why we've designed technology that will monitor it over time, because you do need to see how things change over time, and you need to check in regularly. You need to ask the question.
You need to ask the question. Thank you for saying that, because I want to bring this back around to the unlimited PTO for just a moment, because we did actually have a client who's just recently signed on with Mindful Appy that mentioned the unlimited PTO aspect, because they really do care about their employees, and they implemented unlimited PTO in order to make sure that people actually took time off, that they weren't going to the end of the year and realizing, oh, I'm about to lose all of my PTO for this year because I didn't take any time off throughout the year. And so they're now starting to ponder, okay, yes, unlimited PTO is fine, but what else do I need to do to actually get them to take that time off? And it's part of the reason why they wanted to implement Mindful Appy into their business, because then they could ask, hey, how do you feel about unlimited PTO? How do you feel about us reminding you once every 3 months to take 3 or 4 days off? There are several different ways that they are already talking about using Mindful Appy in a way to ask those specific questions about that particular aspect of culture. And getting that feedback obviously can help guide how they implement a change, but also whether or not that's really the thing that needs to change, right? Tina, do you want to unpack that just a little bit for folks?
I got my brain off on a rabbit trail, which was I needed to change my algorithm
I love it.
And I was like, oh, I need to write this down because I'm going to forget. And I need to make sure in my algorithm that one of my responses when people report that they're tired is I need to ask them when is the last time they took time off.
Nice.
So,
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't have any color to add then.
I do think that I think it's important to recognize that even just process and of asking people how has value.
Mm-hmm.
Even if sometimes they're going to be honest with you and say, we're not doing too well, like we're struggling. You may not be able to point to exactly what that is, but the process of just asking is really powerful. And I think when it is rooted in other kinds of changes you're trying to make, so it's like, hey, we're going to start tracking this, but also because we're doing these other things, we're moving towards unlimited PTO. We're doing one mental health day off every month. We are shifting towards ensuring that no one's responding to emails in the evening. And then when you take things like mindful appy, combine them with things like tracking PTO, like what are some of those internal measures? Are people taking time off? What is their use of their EAP looking like? Like all of those pieces, I think when you take those together, a sense of what's going on. And then I think the power of reporting back, hey, we've been tracking this and this is what we've seen happening, which may lead to other questions, right? But I think I know for myself in that role, just the fact that you're asking says that you care. And I think the studies are showing us that people want to know, employees want to know that the employer cares. And one of the ways that we show care is by asking. One of the ways that we show is by bringing folks in to talk about these topics, but then also that follow up of, and then what are you doing differently because of that? Otherwise, you're just checking boxes. So I think it's sort of a package deal of doing all of these things together really helps employees and teams to understand that they really do matter and that someone's paying attention to that. I think it's really powerful just to be asking the question.
Huge. We put so much value in asking the question.
Yeah.
Well, and the response is also important. We go back to what you were saying about empathy does not relieve us of accountability, right? It's
Mhm.
actually both. And what I find really interesting in the way that mindful appy works is that empathy is engaged because we ask the question, but accountability is also engaged because we want the feedback and we act on that feedback. That feedback then informs what's the next step and what's the next step and what's the next step. So empathy and accountability actually go hand in hand when we're doing it correctly. And mindful appy is one of those systems that it kind of takes the mystery out of it. It's like, how do I actually, you ask the question and you act on the feedback. And that is part of the reason why I have this link to mindful appy up on the screen right now. So if this is something that, oh, okay, I get that, and I want something that I can actually keep track of how we're changing and how we're making things better in 2022 for our employees, for our company at large, this is the place that you can go and actually start that process and see what mindful appy is like, how it works, how it could be implemented at your company. I definitely want to give you all of the tools because you're right. It requires asking that question, but it also requires acting on the feedback once you've gotten it.
Yep.
I love it.
Absolutely. Wow. Okay. We've got it all figured out.
Do we really?
I hope they were taking notes. Hope you're taking notes out there. We'll have notes
Thing I
for
want
you.
to say,
or at least clicking on those links.
yeah, and I think it's important to recognize that again, we're here we are, the one, and just starting like, oh, things are feeling more. We're going through another, having felt like, okay, we're getting there, right? And now, oh, more news, another I think it's really important as we step into 2022 the world is going to continue to be on this roller coaster. So now more than ever, important that employers are creating some good, safe seats for folks to ride the roller coaster. There is so much that we don't have we're not in control of the roller coaster. We don't know when the dips are happening. We don't know when this ride's going to end. So many are control. But what employees have is you have control over certain aspects of your team's life by creating opportunities for them to practice good self-care, by supporting that. I mean, everyone on how you talk about mental health, how you talk about self-care, all of those things, like all of that roller coaster image creates a safe, right? We have safety belts on our seats. We've got some padding, like it's going to ride, but we have something to hold on to, and we're holding on to it together. That can be
we may need
really
a roller coaster
powerful.
buddy.
What?
It's crazy. What's that,
We
Michelle?
may need a roller coaster buddy.
Exactly. That's
to ride
right.
with.
Yeah, it's
So-
kind of creepy, like just really flipping it on its head. Like the fact that work can be your safe place is not something that people really would probably have ever thought possible, especially 10, 20, or 30 years ago. But
Yep.
I feel like it is, and I'm the eternal optimist.
Well, I am too. And so I just think that there's some great opportunities for business leaders, for team leads, for companies to really take this and say, let's here's some things we have control over, and let's possibility of, again, to create work as this place as being a source of safety and a place that supports your mental health, that is a place of empathy, because we got a roller coaster ride again this next year that we're going to be riding. And so we spend the bulk of spend than we do any other activity in our lives. If we're fortunate, we spend more time sleeping, but for many of us, that's not even true, right? So activity that we spend the most amount of time, there's such potential for us to transform our work, create those places that are safe, that do the ride with a little more ease. And I think that that's exciting. And I think we all get to play a part in that.
Me too. That's so great. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen.
You bet.
Thank you. And thank you for being willing to get into the weeds with me and talk about some of the practical application of these wonderful, amazing ideas that everybody goes, oh my gosh, that seems like it's so much. It is, but it's manageable. And I really appreciate both of you taking the time to show folks that this is manageable and it's worth doing.
Yes.
Thank you. As always, it's always a great conversation.
So much.